This video is for entertainment purposes only. None of the information you're about to hear should be considered medical advice, and you should always consult a licensed medical practitioner before embarking on a health or lifestyle change. Well, good evening, everyone. Just Jason here. As you can see, we've got a guest with us tonight. As advertised throughout the week, we've got Paul, who goes by Defense Wiz on YouTube, with us tonight to sort of give us some insights into, living a ketogenic lifestyle with type 1 diabetes. With anyone that's been following the channel for a while, we've had Paul on the podcast as an episode a couple months back, and we wanted to do a follow-up to answer any questions that people might have. So how you doing tonight, Paul?
Good, Jason. How you going?
Good. Oh, good. Thanks for coming back on here and sort of expanding sort of the information that you gave us when we did the recorded podcast a couple of months ago. I know we'd right from that point, we wanted to get back together and sort of give people the opportunity to ask questions and to get into the topic a bit deeper. So thanks for being here to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we don't have to go like 6 months of scheduling.
Yeah. Like I say, everyone's busy, but it's good to reconnect. And I would suggest, if anyone hasn't seen the previous episode where we had a conversation before, it's in the podcast playlist. So let's just take a quick look and see who's here. First of all, we've got Uncle Big Guy here. We've got Lynn, 22Q Cats, in the house. I've got Tiffany from Canadian Family Life is here. Sharon Holloway is in the house. Looks like Sharon just picked up a gifted membership that was donated. So congratulations to that, Sharon. Thank you for doing that super chat. I definitely appreciate it. Who else? We've got Air Frying Auntie in the house. Everyone's just saying hi to each other here. Yeah. So yeah, Sharon picked up that gifted membership. Now we've got Pete in the house too. Great supporter there as well. So Paul, why don't we sort of, for those who didn't see the original video, why don't we start with, sort of your background and, how you got to the point where you started keto, and then we can go from there.
Sure. Pretty much I've been healthy my whole adult life, starting in my teen years. I've been an athlete since I was 13, all throughout high school, all a Division I college athlete. It wasn't until probably about 2011. Previous to that, I'd gone through 3 injuries and surgeries connected to my beach volleyball that all required the usual months of rehab and that kind of thing. But I recovered very quickly from all 3 of those. Got back ahead of the protocol, competing with the orthopedic surgeon's blessing. We were all good to go. The 4th injury surgery, I knew when I woke up in the recovery room that this one was not like the others. I was in so much pain that I hadn't experienced in the others. The prior 3 were 2 knees and the left shoulder. This one was the right rotator cuff. And I just knew something was wrong, but whatever. So I went through the typical rehab protocols, all the physical therapy, and got the okay to start playing again. And everything was going okay, but I was noticing some things about 6 to 8 months post-surgery. And the first thing I noticed was I was getting super thirsty much quicker than I ever used to. With that came frequent bathroom breaks. Now, because this 4th surgery had so much bad repercussions to it, it was the first time I ever had to take painkillers, and in order to mitigate everything. And I thought that because I took those painkillers, that's why I was experiencing the thirst experiencing, because my body was trying to toxify itself through the thirst, get the water to flush all the toxins out of my body and that kind of thing. So I went a year with that, and I didn't correlate the bathroom with anything because I was drinking so much water. I just thought it was a natural progression. So about a year after that, I started noticing that I was having some really weird effects to me. And this started directly after coming back from a trip from Australia. Whenever I travel internationally or on a boat, I always get land sick when I come home. It takes me about 3 days to get that land sickness out of me. Same thing happens when I travel internationally by plane. I get down to wherever I'm going. 3 days, I'm out, with dizziness and my body trying to get used to everything, and I'm good to go. And the same thing happened when I got down to Australia. When I came home, that dizziness and that weird feeling didn't go away. And I didn't know what it was. I thought maybe I caught a virus or something like that, but whatever. I only go to the doctor when I'm like truly, truly, truly on death's door. I just figured, whatever, I'll deal with it. About 6 months after the fact, I decided, okay, it was time to go see a primary care. And I was misdiagnosed with first vertigo, benign positional vertigo. They just thought my equilibrium was off, and I was sent to a physical therapist and given all these exercises to do. And after about 4 months of doing that, nothing was working out there. During that time, I was starting to notice that I was losing a good amount of weight, which didn't make any sense to me because I was eating like a horse, like I normally would during a season, and I was losing weight. And so I went to see the doctor again with these concerns. Then, because I had just gotten back from Australia, I was diagnosed as possibly having a parasite. So I was given all the medications to rid my body of all parasitical stuff. And I was still losing weight. And that was about 3 months later, that wasn't taking effect. So about 1 year of getting that misdiagnosis, I finally went back to my PCP and was like, look, here's the deal. Something's wrong with me. I'm down to 109 soaking wet. I mean, you lift my shirt up, I could see my rib cage. That hasn't happened since like ever. And so they finally did a blood sugar test on me, and my blood sugar fasting was 450. And they did an A1C test on me, one of the instant read A1C tests, and my A1C was 14.4. And so right away, because I was an adult without any kind of testing or anything like that, I was diagnosed as having type 2 diabetes. No blood work, no blood tests, no nothing. Because I didn't know any better, I accepted the diagnosis. But in the back of my mind, I was like, wait a minute, I don't fit what I perceive to be the characteristics of type 2. Type 2 is insulin resistance, and I led a life of not doing things to lead myself to insulin resistance. I didn't understand how that could be. But again, I had such a narrow knowledge of type 2. I figured, okay, maybe there's other things that could lead that diagnosis. So that was in June of 2014. I was following everything that the doctor was saying. He put me on metformin, as they do, and I started restricting carbohydrate intake, no sugar at all, trying to my limited knowledge of what I had about carbohydrates, avoiding as much as what I thought I could. And after 3 months, I still had no improvement in my health. I lost even more weight. My A1C had not budged, and my fasting blood sugar had gone up. So I finally got recommended to see and referred to an endocrinologist. And I was sitting in her office, and she walked in the door, introduced herself, took one look at me and how gaunt I was, and basically said, "You need to go to emergency, and I'm calling them to tell them you're coming." And me being the belligerent athlete, I'm like, "I don't need to go to emergency. What are you talking about?" And she laid it right out without doing any kind of blood test or any kind of testing. She knew this by looking at me. She's like, "You have type 1 diabetes and you need to get to emergency, and I'm trying to save your life." And, so first I was like, "Oh, you're just being melodramatic now." But I knew something was wrong. And this woman is obviously an endocrinologist for a reason. So maybe I should go to emergency. And I did. And I was put on an insulin drip in emergency and stayed overnight and was given the instruction to go back to the endocrinologist the next day. Overnight, on the insulin drip, they got my blood sugar down from, I think it was like 385 at that point in time, to 93. And I'll never forget this. I was like, 93, okay, good. That's a good blood sugar. What they brought me in for breakfast was hysterical in the emergency room, and having a type 1 diagnosis: pancakes, orange juice, a banana, yogurt, and eggs. And I'm like, aren't I supposed to be avoiding carbohydrates if I have any form of diabetes? And I'm looking at 4 out of the 5 things here have carbohydrates in them. I'm not getting this. But I was hungry and I hadn't eaten all night. So I ate pretty much the banana, the eggs, and the yogurt. 2 hours later, I saw the endocrinologist and my blood sugar had jacked up to 495. So that's when, I explained this to her in her office. I was at 93 this morning. How could I go that high that fast? And that's when she laid it out. You're no longer producing insulin, and you have type 1 diabetes, and you need to be on injectable insulin for the rest of your life now. And that began the life change. And it was just very, very, very hard to accept and come to terms with, but you do what you got to do. So that's how that's the story of how I found my way to low carb. How I found my way to keto was about 2 months into the diagnosis, and then, taking injectable insulin and stuff like that. A friend of mine had reached out to me when she found out that I was diagnosed with type 2, and introduced me into Facebook, a few of the type 2 groups that were on there. And, once I got the diagnosis of type 2 or type 1, I realized that type 2 wasn't really giving me the information I was looking for. They didn't understand what it was like to inject insulin and have to do all the things that you need to do as a type 1 when it came to taking the insulin shots and pricking your fingers and that kind of thing. And during this time, I was searching all these other groups specifically for type 1, and I started noticing this woman in a lot of these groups, especially the low carb arenas. She was like almost in every single group that I was searching out. And I was starting to pay attention with what she had to say as far as extremely low carb as a type 1. What another thing that drew me to her, that she was an elite level cyclist. So I was like, oh, an athlete that is type 1. Okay, cool. I can relate to this. And then the third thing was she had such a sarcastic wit to her that I was like, oh my God, okay, I gotta seriously, follow her. She's got everything I look for in a person that I could get some advice from. And she I decided to direct message her, and she started telling me about this group that she was in called Type 1 Grit, which was basically a low carb type 1 diabetes group that followed the instructions of Dr. Richard Bernstein, who is the guru, as I found out, of low carb and type 1 diabetes. So she recommended that I read his book, Diabetes Solutions. and get a feel of, where I'm at and what his instructions are when it comes to this. Luckily, I found that he had a YouTube channel because I'm not a real big reader, and I was able to watch a lot of his videos and gain a lot of knowledge with that. And then I got in contact with the director of that group, R.D. Dykman, and started chatting with him through instant message, and he invited me into the group. And from that point on, I just educated myself on what everybody else was doing, what they were all going through, and that kind of thing. Ways to keep myself super low carb, and in that respect, one of the things he teaches is the law of small numbers. So you keep your carbohydrates small. That means small doses of insulin, so you're not going to spike and you're not going to drop low. So that was a really cool theory to learn. I was like, okay, I can put that into practice because, I'd already cut down my carbohydrates big time. Keeping myself to just low carb, non-starchy vegetables and high protein and that kind of thing. So when I found that group, it was already in line with what I was starting to do, but this group gave me better ideas and other ways of being able to mitigate everything. And then the one thing I found out through that group and through Dr. Bernstein was how to dose my insulin for protein intake. And because what I was noticing was after I ate protein, especially the amount of protein that I eat, I was noticing that 3, 4, 5 hours later, my blood sugar was starting to creep up and creep up and creep up into like the 180s, the 190s. And I was trying to correct myself with insulin, but it was always so late to the game that it took the insulin about 2 hours to have any kind of effect on it. And nobody ever told me that protein, type 1s need to dose insulin for it because of gluconeogenesis. That is something that we have to worry about, and we have to have the knowledge of how to dose insulin for it. Once I got on an insulin pump, it made it a whole lot easier. But when I was injecting insulin, it was a little bit more difficult. People that use injectable insulin, there's an insulin called regular insulin. We shortcut it as R insulin, and that's what a lot of people use to cover protein spikes because it's a longer lasting insulin within the system. So because the protein takes so long to hit the system and then the R insulin takes so long to hit the system, they kind of meet in the middle, and the one mitigates the other and stops the spike from happening. But with my insulin pump, I was able to figure that out. So all in all, from that type 1 grit group, it gave me a good base of knowledge to be able to go forward and learn things that I don't know if I would have learned any other way. And that was in 2014 and 15. I was able to get my health back by 2016 and returned into professional beach volleyball in 2016 and been good ever since. So it was a long journey to get that knowledge, and definitely a long journey to get the correct diagnosis. But, luckily, I kept at it and got the answer that I was looking for.
Yeah, for sure. Like it's, we hear so many stories in this community, more so about obviously like with type 2 diabetes, like that's a fairly common theme in this community. And like you say, there is signs, we all sort of know the signs. We know the lifestyle that mostly creates issues like that. But it's just crazy that it did take that long for them to finally realize that it wasn't what they were saying it was at first. Because like even I did highlight this as just a comment from Andrew here saying that the most important thing with any medical is don't just do it alone, use your doctor's guidance. And that's, there's always got to be, and that's why we always say here on YouTube, none of us are doctors. we're not medical professionals. We can't really give advice. We're not saying this is your story is what you've learned. And, even though it doesn't sound like, it sounds like most of your knowledge hasn't come sort of sitting in an office with a medical professional, but the knowledge that you gained is coming from a doctor who's made it their sort of focus to help people with this lifestyle.
Dr. Bernstein is type 1 himself, and he's 86 years old now, 80,
Mm-hmm.
86 or 87. He's been living with this forever and ever and ever, and he has sung the praises of low carb forever and ever and ever. And he's taken on the American Diabetes Association, trying to get them to realize that what they're doing, what they're saying, all these recommendations that are happening, it's not exactly the best for everybody. Some people need to figure out low carb and need to adopt that lifestyle because they're tired of being on the blood sugar roller coasters, thinking they can eat whatever they want and use insulin to dose for it. It doesn't work that way all the time, especially if you want normalized blood sugars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah,
yeah,
I hear you.
It does make total sense, and I can see where Andrew's coming from there too. Like there's a lot of people on YouTube and on Facebook and everything that sort of talk like they have the answers, but 9 times out of 10, or all of that talk is coming from personal experience,
right?
Like, and that's where I come from with my story and keto and low carb and all that. And again, that's why, there's things I've found that work for me that aren't going to work for other people. And, and that goes with everything with lifestyle changes. You can't just say, well, this is the way it's going to work for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
There are some, common themes to how we can change our health for the better. But like you say, there's such a spectrum of, okay, well, I was probably insulin resistant. I didn't have diabetes per se at all, but I was probably pre-diabetic when I started keto. Of course, I never actually had a diagnosis of it, but changing my lifestyle has helped me get out of that range. But, like you say, so there's that end of the spectrum where, things really could have gone bad, but I was able to correct course in time. But then you have your end of it where, like you've said, you lived a healthy lifestyle, you're a professional athlete. And so for that to creep up later in life is I don't know. I personally don't know if that's a very common thing. Does that happen to a lot of people later, like at your age, or is that something that's still fairly uncommon?
Yeah, what I've found through the type 1 grit group and a couple other type 1 groups that I'm in, people that are diagnosed with type 1 as adults, it's usually, not every time, but usually after some sort of trauma to the body. The woman that I told you about that I had noticed in a lot of other groups, she had gone through a bout with cancer and one other disease. I can't remember the other one, but some sort of trauma to the body. With me, I correlate it back to the shoulder surgery because everything started happening after that shoulder surgery. Can I prove it? No, but it's a big coincidence that everything happened right after that surgery, and that I was in so much pain after that surgery. But yeah, a lot of, like, everybody hears about type 1 diabetes and they think, oh, you must have been born with it or had it as a kid. And nowadays, more people are being diagnosed with it as an adult than ever before. And like, there's the way that it's talked about these days, it's called latent autoimmune diabetes in adults, or LADA. That's the typical acronym for it. Some people, and this is another reason why I realized that this was spreading out over time, because LADA is very latent and starts very, very slow, and it just creeps along. And if you don't catch it early, you can definitely, have some major problems with it. If I would have gone another month undiagnosed, I was told that I could have died. So yeah, did I lose you? There we go.
Yeah. 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 You're buffering a little bit there.
Jason, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here. I think you're frozen on this end, though.
Still there?
Yeah, maybe close it out and come back in.
Jason, are you still there?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me? No. Okay. Well, we'll try and sort that out. We'll see if Paul reconnects here, and then we'll bring him back up. So yeah, if you have any questions, as you can see on the banner there, just ask them in the chat. If you put 3 Qs in front of it, just so I can see them and star them, so we can get to them. Let's look. Here, Fernand, he was saying, when I was diagnosed, my specialist. Oh, looks like we're back here. Okay. Looks like you're back.
Sorry about that. Don't know what happened.
That's all right. It happens. Yeah, usually if you just close it out and come back in, it'll usually clear things up. So.
Gotcha.
Yeah, no worries. I was just reading Jonna's comment here that when she was diagnosed, her specialist knew nothing about low carb or keto. Thankfully, she's accepting what I was showing and talking to her about. Yeah, and when I first started this, the number of stories I heard about, specialists not really understanding how keto and low carb can help these diagnoses was it was a common theme, it seemed like. But I don't know what you've seen, but it seems like to me things are starting to change a little bit. Like a lot of medical professionals have had to accept the fact that what the American Diabetes Association, and same here in Canada, what some of these organizations are saying may not necessarily be the best or only standard of practice. You still hear me, Paul? Or?
Yep, I can hear you.
Yeah,
you cut out for a quick second there.
Yeah. No, I was just saying, like, it seems like things are starting to turn. They are here in Canada. There's a lot more. Again, like the head of the Canadian Diabetes Association lives like a ketogenic lifestyle as well. So things are starting to get a little bit better understood, I think, compared to 10 years ago. Let's say it was very rare for like a specialist to suggest this kind of lifestyle for a change.
Right. And like mine wasn't like resistant to it, but mine wasn't also super supportive of it either, until after the first year, when my A1C went from 14.4 to 5.3. I'm sorry, first year it went from 14.4 to 6.7. Then the following 6 months it went to 5.3, and then 3 months later I got down to 4.8. And since then, so that was 14, 15, beginning of 16. From the beginning of 2016 until my last A1C last month, I've been between 4.4 and 4.9 the whole entire time. So it's not that she doesn't like the fact that I do it. She just doesn't advocate it for all of her patients. But if a patient comes to her and says, I've decided to adopt this low carb, ketogenic, whatever lifestyle, she's not going to block it or anything like that. So, so I respect that at least.
Yeah, for sure. Like you say, it's, yeah, as long as they you know are supportive of what you're doing and not trying to talk you out of things like, and that's been sort of one of the frustrating parts that I've seen is that, how many stories we've seen of uh, medical professionals trying to talk patients out of doing things, even though the evidence, like just as a one-off for so many people, is so clear that, like if you're improved your health that much within 1 year, it kind of doesn't make sense for them to try and steer you away from what's working for you.
Right. Yeah, I just some of the stories I've seen in the Type 1 Grit Facebook group, um, there's been couples that have gotten divorced, and one of the people in the marriage and the ex-marriage took the other one to court because they felt they were endangering their child by doing a low carb lifestyle with their type 1 diabetes. And this was, and I couldn't believe what I was reading on one of these things. I was like, who does that? Who
Mm-hmm.
does that? Why would you advocate if your kid has type 1 diabetes and the parent wants to limit the carbohydrates? How could it how could another parent be like, no, the kid has to be a kid? I don't get that.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not a parent, so whatever. That's just me.
Sure. And I think it's again, that comes right back to sort of what, and I was the same way too. It's what a lot of people have learned their whole lives, right? Like it's been ingrained in people's lifestyles that, it can't be good to be eating protein and fats and all that. And we're supposed to be eating processed carbohydrates and seed oils, right? Like that's the real food in our diets has been so demonized for the last 50, 60 years now,
Right.
that entire generations have grown up on the idea that eating these real foods is worse for you than eating the manufactured foods. And unfortunately, like there is going to be people that can never accept that. That was, I wouldn't come out and say straight out lies, but this information was paid for by groups that had interest in changing the way people thought. So once you start to realize that, then I think that's when things can change, or it makes it a lot easier to accept, okay, well, maybe what I was doing before was just harming me. So let's try something different. And then you realize that, hey, wait a minute, eating real food is really the way to go.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's see if we're missing anything. I saw Dominic and Pega come in the house here. Great supporters of the channel. They're always around for the live streams. Got Kendra here. We are taught that processed food and the food pyramid is what's right. Anything else is bad. Yes, it is sad. Kendra has a very motivating channel as well. She's with spiritual and physical motivation for everyone. She just did her first live stream last night that we checked out. It was lots of fun. Hopefully you enjoyed it, Kendra. It was a good time. So
we're trying to get that food pyramid flipped over so that way the meat and the protein that's on the top normally should be on the bottom, and that should be most of what we're getting in.
Yeah. But then we keep getting these studies paid for by certain groups that try and tell people that Fruit Loops are better for you than, ribeye steak. So it's kind of
exactly.
Yeah. So, like I say, you can only take studies and things like the food pyramid, which if people don't know, the food pyramid was created by companies trying to sell products. Mm-hmm. It wasn't created by anyone that knew anything about what they were talking about. It's basically, a certain company wanted to sell product and they talked the government into letting them create this, fabricated way of living that, like Kendra says, is that we've all right from childhood been told, well, this is what you need to do. And, it's unfortunately it wasn't the best advice, but I think a lot of people are waking up to that fact.
Right.
So, which is all we can hope for, having conversations like this, the one we did on the podcast, like that's what is important, is to try and come together and get that information out to everybody. Thankfully we've got lots of good doctors out there that are finally starting to shift their thought behind it. We've got Dr. Barry, who, he's got millions of people following him on social media. So right there is a good, at least we've got voices out there that are really starting to shift the narrative, I think. So I personally, I just hope it continues to a point where, what we're doing, and then just as a general population eating real foods, and then we can help people in your situation understand that, hey, there is an option. You don't have to live with, what comes with, just living on insulin for the rest of your life. Not to say that you don't have to use it still, because obviously that we all know that, you can't cure it, but it doesn't have to, rule your life. Like you say, you're an elite level athlete, and, you can still do everything that you want to do by properly living a lifestyle that supports what you're dealing with.
Right. And that's the, like, every day, like I joke that type 1 diabetes is an everyday science experiment, because even if I eat the same food day in, day out, day in, day out, and take the same amount of insulin for that food day in, day out, day in, day out, the fifth day, I could just have something freak go on in my body and I'll have a 250 blood sugar spike without knowing any reason why. The body does what it's going to do. And with type 1 diabetes, you can only do what you know and do what you've experimented on and do by a series of repetition. But ultimately, the body's going to do what it wants to do, and you just kind of have to roll with it. So the nice thing about type 1 is that I'm not as, like, yes, I'm focused, but I'm not, like, I roll with a lot of punches more than I ever used to. So if ever I have some sort of freaky 180 or 200 blood sugar, and I know that I didn't consume any carbohydrates, it's just my body being like, ha ha ha, yeah, you still have type 1. So, you just got to take a sense of humor with it.
Sure. Yeah. And it's, to a lesser extent, of course, a lot of us that are trying to adjust our lifestyles, like, if what works even on a low carb or keto or ketovore or carnivore lifestyle, anyone who's stuck with it for a certain amount of time will experience the same thing, where what you've been doing for the last 6 months, all of a sudden it stops working,
Right.
and then you have to adjust and you have to pivot and make changes. Okay, like, so you were feeling great for 6 months doing one thing. You're right. Your body's always going to be changing, and, you just have to figure it out on the fly, because unfortunately there is no sort of textbook to say, okay, well, after 6 months, this is going to happen. And, after 2 years, this is going to happen. I've been at it for over 5 years now, and I have changed the way I do things 3 or 4 times. Right. So I think once you get into changing your lifestyle long enough, everybody realizes that that's the reality of it. But people, the first couple of times it happens, I think it throws people off a little bit.
Right. And with my insulin pump, in the beginning, I was so afraid to make any changes to any of my settings without my endocrinologist being there, like, I'm doing this and I'm doing this. Okay, but maybe do this, maybe do this. Now I'm changing settings on the fly within, like, every 6 months, because in February and March, I always go through a bout of just unknown insulin resistance. I start needing about 50% more insulin than I normally do the rest of the year, and I don't know why. It happens every single year, February, March, and then April, it kind of subsides and I go back to my normal. So I have to adjust all of my settings within my pump to have a higher insulin to carb and protein ratio. I have to shorten my duration of insulin in my system, and I have to have a higher a basal. And a basal basically is your metabolic insulin drip that you get every hour. The body needs insulin every hour, and I can set it on my pump where I get a finite measured dose every single hour. So I have to increase that a little bit in February and March because of the resistance that I go through. So it's weird. I started getting that in 2016, and there's never been an answer, but that is the one thing that is consistent in my life. So I'm just now starting to come out of it now that we've hit April.
Right. Yeah. Well, like you say, at least you know sort of as the patterns show up, you can know what to expect,
right?
As those times come around. So something from Kendra here saying, I have kids age 9, 11, 13, and 18, and they all eat low carb. For 2+ years now, the health of the entire household is very noticeably improved. So yeah, that's awesome. Like I say, when you can get the entire family on board, and getting, and that's one thing, if younger adults and children can get, I'm never one to sort of say, oh, don't let them have anything fun. I'm not that guy. I don't say that to anybody. Everybody has to make their own choices. Everyone does what they feel is best for everybody. But I think instilling good habits for eating habits the younger that's done, I think is just setting them up for a better life overall.
I agree with you to like an extent where I just want to explain this. There are several type 1 diabetes groups around Facebook. High carb, low carb, all carb, no carb. I mean, all ends of the spectrum.
Sure.
And what I don't understand is when I see a parent like literally at her wit's end about her kids' high blood sugars and doesn't know what to do. And then gets asked, well, what does your child eat? And they start listing all this sugar-filled crud. And the suggestion gets made, not you need to, it's have you ever thought about going to a low carb lifestyle? No, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to deprive my kid. Okay, here you are complaining at your wit's end, but you don't want to make this kind of change or even remotely think about making this kind of change. I don't get that disconnect. That's why I try not to get involved with the whole parent thing, because I'm not a parent, but if I were a parent and my kid had type 1 diabetes, sorry, I'm the parent. This is what we're doing. But,
Yeah. And that, like, to go back to my point was, yeah, absolutely. If I had a child that had type 1 diabetes, I would be pushing that as hard as I could.
Absolutely.
Like that's because, but again, that's only because of what I've learned.
Right.
So, and unfortunately, there's a lot of people that they're afraid of those changes. I think it is frustrating. It would be to be seeing people being at their wits' end about a situation, and you yourself knowing, well, there is relief, like there is a way to help. But unfortunately, it's not like you can, just take them and say, well, you got to do this, right? Like it's just not, all you can do is your best to provide information the best you can, and hopefully they take it, right?
the fact that it was just a flat out no,
Mm-hmm.
not, oh, could you maybe tell me a little bit more about that? Maybe, who knows? Maybe low carb was slammed down their throat 3 months prior to that comment, but I don't know. But when I read the initial post and this woman was just like, seemed like she was so very much wanting to do anything that she could do for her child. And then
Mm-hmm.
when low carb was suggested by somebody else, and it was just a flat out no, I was like, then you're not at your
Yeah,
wits' end, and you're not as frustrated as you make yourself sound to be. So,
sure, sure. Yeah, and that's I can see like that's a definite, very frustrating thing to witness and to have to see like that kind of interaction going on. And I think it goes that happens sort of again on every end of the spectrum. Like I've seen a lot of people that or have asked me, when I first started keto and I lost 80 pounds, they're like, well, how did you do it? I'd like to change the way I'd like to lose some weight and all that. But then as
right.
soon as you say low carb, it's like, nope, don't
Yep.
want to hear it. Right. So, and that's when I stopped talking about it. Right. So, because I know at that point, if they don't want to hear it, then I'm not going to waste my time talking to them about it. I'd love to, but unfortunately, it is one of those things where there is a line in the sand that people or a lot of people aren't sort of willing to cross for any kind of change in their health.
When I was misdiagnosed of having type 2, I was encouraged to take this class through my endocrinologist. And there were all these folks with type 2 in the class. And I will never forget this guy sitting next to me. And when the instructor was starting to talk about reducing carbohydrates, he slammed his hand on his desk. He was already diagnosed fully with type 2, slammed his hand on his desk and said, I am not going to cut bread or pasta or whatever it was else out of my diet. I'm just not going to. And I just kind of looked at him like, dude, it's just food.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yep. So we got Paula and Jason here. We've made simple changes, not full keto in any way, but just a few changes to notice differences. And they're right into the chaffle craze. They won one of the gave away some dash minis, and they won one of them.
oh,
So
that's right. I remember
they've been experimenting with them. So they're enjoying that. But again, I think I don't want anyone, like especially with a conversation like this is a very sort of deep talk about low carb, and I've never sort of, at least in my sort of situation, again, yours is going to be a different situation, but I've never wanted anyone to think that, okay, you have to do what I did. And that was go, from one day to eating crap all the time to the very next day, just trying to eat all whole foods. It's really hard to do, unless you're forced to with situations like yours where you had to make a change. Like that was life or death kind of thing.
that. Right.
If you're just trying to improve your health, it doesn't always have to be, just grabbing all of everything out of the cupboards and throwing it in the trash and changing your lifestyle 100%, because little things here and there can definitely make a big improvement in your life.
Well, I fully believe that like keto needs to be sustainable. That's why
Mm-hmm.
I totally, like, I've been saying N equals one longer than a lot of people. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, not everybody follows the same eating style or eating plan. What is um, consistent with keto is that it is a low carb diet, as low as you can possibly make it.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else, do it the way that works for you. High fat,
Mm-hmm.
low fat, high protein, moderate protein, whatever. I don't care. I'm not your mom. Do what you want to do. All you need to do is be consistent with the carbohydrate intake, and you're well going to be on the way to a healthier lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So let me see if we can get caught up on, see if there's any questions or comments. Carrie's saying here, why do you never hear a pterodactyl in the bathroom? Because the pee is silent. Oh, Carrie, we can always count on you. Kendra is saying she needs some, I think they're talking about the Dash Minis so that she can make chaffles. You don't need Dash Minis. You can use a waffle iron or even a little skillet. That's lots of ways to make low carb kind of things like that. So Dominic's saying they have two. I think, yeah, last week I gave away two more of the Dash Minis, and Dominic won one of them, and they were gracious enough to, pass it on to someone else because they already have a couple of them. So that was amazing. So we were able to get some other people that haven't experienced the whole chaffle thing.
Sweet.
Get them a chaffle maker so that they can start experimenting as well. So just want to make sure air frying anti-carbs are quite addictive. Yes, they are. And that's, that's everything that tastes good, unfortunately. And until you cut them out long enough, and those ribeyes are the one, like for me, ribeyes are like one of the best tasting thing in the world. It used to be potato chips and Reese's peanut butter cups, but now things have changed now that I've been able to avoid them. So,
well, back when I was diagnosed, going the sweet route, which I'm not a big sweet eater to start with, but back when I was diagnosed in 2014, the only two people around that were making low carb sweet recipes were Carolyn Ketchum and Maria Emmerich. Mm-hmm. Now you can find anything that you want to duplicate low carb and sweet. You can find a recipe for it anywhere on the internet. People are developing recipes all the time. YouTube, Facebook, just general Google searches. So we've definitely come a long way in 10 years where, it was two people prior and now it's quite a lot of hundreds.
Yeah, there's a ton of them out there. Like you've got, like you say, so many creators out there that are coming up with new ways of doing things. There's been a lot of, like you say, people trying to perfect replacements for the high carb things. You've got lately it's Chris from Chris Cooking Nashville. I don't know if you've seen his stuff. He's got some amazing recipes. The way he's been able to adjust things to make it into a low carb option is just the stuff he comes up with is just insane. But you're right, it has gone from, even when I started, there wasn't a ton out there. Like really when I started, it was all fat bombs and mug cakes, and that was about it.
Oh, and God, I remember the fat bombs.
Yeah. And then Steve from Serious Keto, he sort of brought the chaffle craze back to life, and right. he built a channel on chaffles, and then that kind of fizzled out. That's why I'm trying to sort of make that my focus now, is to try and introduce as many of those different recipes to everyone that I can.
You've got some seriously good-looking concoctions on yours. Yeah. The Baby Bell, and what did you mix the Baby Bell with the other day? I can't remember, but it looked really good.
Yeah, I think I had pepperoni in it. Yes, like I just sliced up some pepperoni.
Yeah, and the halloumi that you did a couple weeks ago, that looked phenomenal too.
Yeah, the halloumi one surprised me. It was one of those ones where I've never actually had halloumi before.
Oh, really?
Because it's funny, like a lot of creators out there spend a lot of time perfecting recipes before they film them and put them on YouTube. And that's just not me.
Right.
Like I'll be walking through the grocery store and I'll say, hey, maybe this will work in a chaffle.
This will chaffle.
Yeah. And then I put it in, and 9 times out of 10, it works out pretty good. I have a couple of videos that I've made that I haven't released because they were really not worth releasing, but ultimately, if it works in other situations, like if things go together in other situations, like the one I did last week with the strawberries and cream cheese, well, it's, to me, things like that go together. So that's why I
Right.
try and put them together in chaffles. But like you say, there's a million options out there for if you have a sweet tooth, but you want to cut back on the carbs and you want to try different options. You could, you could go down such a rabbit hole
Oh, God, yes.
of recipes out there that it would take you, a month just to get through them all.
I've still got recipes in my Copy Me That website that, I mean, we're talking back from 2015 that I haven't even made yet. That it was just like, yeah, one of these days, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm about simplicity when it comes to cooking. If I can't grill it or fry it in a frying pan, or make it in an instant pot, I'm probably not going to do it. So, that's,
Sure.
I love to cook, but I like to cook and eat within an hour's time. I don't, that's why I'll never buy a smoker. I will never buy a Rectech. I'll never buy anything that takes umpteenth hours to prepare because
Mm-hmm.
you've lost me at that point in time. I want it now. I want it fast and I want it good. So,
Sure. And that's my focus too with, ultimately my diet is the same way. Like I meal prep ground beef all the time, like 2 or 3 times a week.
mhm,
And, that's what I grab. And I always have eggs. If I don't feel like spending any time cooking, then ground beef and eggs it is.
right.
Just get the fuel I need to keep me going. But with content, as far as YouTube goes, that's why I've sort of latched onto the whole chaffle thing,
Oh,
because
of
I
course.
think it's simple. You just throw some things in a bowl and cook it in a waffle iron.
Mhm.
For the most part, most of my recipes, the videos are only 4 minutes long, but it only took me 6 or 7 minutes to make it.
Right.
Right. So it's not like it takes you, hours to do these things. So that's,
No,
and
no.
because I think a lot of people are the same way. If there's quick and easy options that are a little bit healthier, then I think that's the way to go.
And there, I mean, for the people that really want to spend a lot of time making elaborate chaffle desserts, there's recipes out there for that too. I have one from
Hmm.
back in 2018 for a German chocolate cake chaffle that are like 3 layers high with all
Yeah.
the fixins. And I'm like, have I ever made it? Hell no, but I
Yeah.
have it in case I ever want to.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. You can definitely, the sky's the limit. You're right. There's been a lot, and those come from the people that have the patience and the time to
And the
perfect recipes,
time.
right? So
Exactly.
let's get caught up here. Yes, I make cookies, cakes, candies, donuts. We still have our sweet treats. Just swap some ingredients. Yeah. Again, there's people that, still like to have the sweet things. I find a lot of people sort of gravitate away somewhat from sweet things as they get more low carb, but you got to do what you got to do to keep your sanity about it, I think.
Well, that's why I met a couple people prior to joining the Two Crazy Ketos group in another group, and they
Mhm.
were hyping up Keto Chow. This was back in like 2017, 18, something like that. It was a while back. It was a long time before I truly found out about a Keto Chow. And
Mhm.
I didn't know much about it. I just heard the word shake, replacement shake, and blah, blah, blah. So I never really thought much about it because I was of the mindset where I want to eat my protein, I don't want to drink my calories, that kind of thing. And then
Mhm.
when I was truly introduced into Keto Chow, when I came into the Two Crazy Ketos group and found you can make ice cream with it, now you got to take a
Mhm.
step back. All of us in the Type 1 Grit group, when Rebel and Halo Top and Enlightened had come out, we were the first ones at the store experimenting on ourselves to see how much insulin do we really need for this stuff because it's got questionable ingredients in it. Do the carbs on the label match the amount of insulin that we should be taking on our ratios and that kind of thing? And what we
Mhm.
found was they weren't matching at all. We needed at least double the amount of insulin based off of the amount of carbs that were listed on the label. So that's
Right.
when a lot of us were like, oh, yeah, ingredients do matter. Soluble corn fiber, which is in Rebel, and I think it's in Enlightened as well. Enlightened Keto. And Halo Top I never even tried because I saw so many people spiking from that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
when I found out that I could make ice cream from Keto Chow, and then I read the ingredients on Keto Chow, I was like, okay, this is something I could get behind. So
Mm-hmm.
luckily I won a gift pack from Joe and Rachel. The day that I decided to order some stuff, I won a gift pack from them, and I was like, oh, okay, cool, I get to try it for free.
Sure.
And when the ice cream was working in the blender, I was like, finally, I get like real ice cream and not a blood sugar spike. I only need about 1 to 1.5 units of insulin to cover this entire bowl of ice cream, whereas I needed 7 to 8 units of insulin to cover a pint of Rebel.
Mm.
So, that difference right there was amazing. Fast forward to this past Christmas, I finally got off my butt and got a Ninja Creamy, and oh my God, the entire consistency of the ice cream that you get from a Ninja Creamy is just heads and shoulders above the blender ice cream that I was making for 2 years. So I was
Sure.
so happy I was able to get one of those at a reduced price. Well, actually, zero price because Amazon reduced the price down and I had Amazon codes to use. So I decided to use them for the Creamy as a Christmas present to myself.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, no more Rebel and no more Enlightened. So that
Yeah.
alone was, that's my sweet treats these days. I don't really bother baking anymore, and I keep looking at my box of keto baking equipment and baking supplies, and I haven't touched them since a year ago Christmas.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And that's yeah, as far as keto chow goes, I've never been one to, I don't think about drinking my meals or any of that either. Like, I just don't enjoy doing that, but I have used it for baking, like in recipes and stuff.
Right.
Yeah, and you're right. It's great for the ingredients, there's nothing sketchy in them in that. Like Chris and Miriam are always really careful when they source their ingredients. They're not going to put anything out there that is even suspect one way or the other.
Right.
So we had a super chat here. Thank you for that, Dominic. Done that so many times. That is amazing. Thanks for the support of the channel. We're here to try and get this kind of information out to everybody, right? That's why I enjoy having guests on the channel that can bring other experiences other than my own. Again, everyone's heard my story before, but I like, and that's why I started the podcast, is because the more stories that we can put out there, the better chance we have to help someone at some point of their journey.
And I realize my story is very niche, and type 1 is, not huge among the keto community. And, we're a very small knit group. But like I said, there's only about 4 or 5 people that I know within the keto communities that I'm in. So I realize that there might not be a ton of questions that people might have. But if you know anybody that is type 1 and has any questions about doing keto, I mean, one of the reasons why I got involved with doing what I was doing when I was diagnosed. There was no support for any adults in my area at all. And I know we talked about this the last time, Jason. I went to the American Diabetes Association, my local chapter there, and the local chapter of the Juvenile Diabetes. Juvenile diabetes was helping the kids, didn't want anything to do with the adults. American Diabetes Association, they had nothing. I was calling around. One guy was actually like, hey, well, we don't have a support group, but how about you start one? And I'm like, Brian Pumpkin, I've been diagnosed 5 minutes. Do you think maybe I can get a handle on this myself? And then maybe we can talk. So there was nothing in my area for support. Thank God I was able to find some people on Facebook that have become very, very good friends of mine. That made it like my goal to be able to, from that point on, once I got my health back, that I wanted to be any kind of support that I could be for any adult that was diagnosed with type 1. later in life, that kind of thing, because I had nothing I could turn to, nobody I could turn to, and nobody I could ask for help. Nobody could show me the way of how to do this. And so I kind of made it my mission that I was going to do whatever I could do to be able to be that support in my area. And I gave my name to ADA, got in touch with somebody over there. I'm like, if you ever get an adult that calls and wants any kind of, questions answered, support, blah, 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 feel free to give them my name. Same with the JDRF. From that point, I was invited, and starting in 2016, I started presenting at type 1 conferences and health and wellness expos as an athlete with type 1 diabetes. And basically, my talks went from 10 minutes of this is me to like 45-minute of this is what I do on a daily basis, and this is how I incorporate my athletics with my diabetes and how I make it harmoniously work for me, kind of thing. So it's been, all my talks have been like really well received. And because I am so niche in that respect, it's actually like a lot of fun to do. And I feel like getting my story out there will be able to help at least one person. So
yeah, and that's been my my goal sort of with this YouTube thing right from day one too, is that I didn't sort of present my journey on YouTube. When I started, it was 2 years into keto. I'd sort of gone through my transition. That wasn't part of what I wanted to put online. It was when I started, it was to do exactly what you're talking about, is try and help anybody that I can, right? The recipe videos and all that, that's all fun. I enjoy doing that kind of stuff because that's things that everybody sort of enjoys participating in and watching and all that. But I think it's these conversations that I think are the most important part, because again, like you say, between the two of us, if one person, even if they didn't comment in the comments or say anything, if one person watched this video and realized, hey, I myself or someone else I know, I could be helping them with this information, that's right there is what makes the time that we spend doing this worthwhile.
Right.
So it looks like Kendra's off to get the kiddos ready for bed. Thank you for coming by, Kendra. Thanks for supporting the channel. Laura was saying, lost my mom, aunt, and grandpa to type 1 diabetes. Wish I'd known about keto then. Yeah. And that is unfortunately a all too common story with type 1 and type 2 diabetes, that unfortunately we learn about these things too late sometimes.
Well, that kind of, I don't know why I didn't mention this in the beginning, but that's kind of where my why is with why I do keto as a lifestyle. My cousin on my dad's side, his cousin on his mom's side, who lived in our area, my cousin's cousin lives in California, but his cousin lives in the southern tier of New York, and he had uncontrolled type 2 diabetes and ended up having his ankle amputated, his right leg amputated, and then shortly after both those surgeries died 6 months later. That's my why. When I was diagnosed with type 1, I made sure that once I got my blood sugars under control with the insulin, I was not ever going to have high blood sugars the way that I had seen so many other people did, and possibly face limb amputation. That just wasn't going to happen. So everybody says, find your why, find your why, find your why. That's mine. And so when Laura was talking about her relatives that had died from type 1, yeah, that's a huge why, as far as, why I stick to keto and make sure that I know what I'm doing when it comes to my insulin regimen.
Sure. Yeah. And yeah, I've been the, proponent of finding out what drives you forward and what can keep you on the right track.
finding your why is the number one. Well, in my opinion, is almost the most important thing.
It is the most important thing. I
Yeah.
agree with you totally, because without it, you're just going to find a reason not to stick with it.
Right.
So it's gotta be something that really gets you. I mean, if it doesn't, then
Sure. Yeah. Like every time I sit there and think, okay, well, why do I sort of put myself through not being able to enjoy what everyone else is enjoying all the time and all that. And then I just have to think back to the moments when I couldn't barely play with my 2-year-old grandson.
Right.
And then that's basically all I have to do is think about that. And that just keeps me going. So like you say, everybody is going to have a different reason to keep going. But I think we all have to get to that point where something is driving you, whether it is like a medical sort of diagnosis or just, wanting to be better, wanting to be around longer for your kids and grandkids and stuff like that. There's all sorts of ways to look at it. So we had Marketplace Boutique come in. Thanks for coming in, Jody. It's good to see you. I have a lot of supporters here on the channel from a group of YouTube creators. So there's a lot of people here that aren't necessarily in the keto, low carb, carnivore sort of family. There are a lot that are, but quite a few people come and support the channel and get the information out. I'm trying to convert them all into loving chaffles one day at a time, but and I've got a few of them hooked on them. So my mission is
we're more than keto.
yeah. So, and that's why networking, I think, is really important to get, again, trying to get this information out through any channel that we can, basically. Laura's saying that's a great why. Yes, for sure. So, okay. Well, we're actually a bit over time. Not that I'm too worried about it, but sort of, is there anything sort of that you wanted to add to the conversation before we wrap things up, or are we?
Like I said, if any of your viewers know anybody that is diagnosed with type 1, has any questions about how to incorporate keto and doing safe insulin regimen and that kind of thing, I am Defense Wiz on Instagram. I'm sorry, Defense Wins Games with a Z. So Defense Wins Games with a Z on Instagram, or you can find me in the Two Crazy Ketos group, or you can instant message me.
Yeah, and I'll put your Instagram link in the description of the video here so that people can find you. I know I'm pretty sure I've got you on Instagram, and it's the same with me. If anyone wants to reach out to me on Instagram, if want to ask questions to either of us, or if you want to ask questions, just leave a comment in the video after the live stream's done, and I'll make sure that Paul sees them. If you don't see anything come through, I'll make sure if there's any questions that you get that information. We'll try and get the answers back to whoever needs them, basically. Cool.
Great.
Okay. Well,
nice chat with you again.
Yeah. And we'll, like I say, we can always do this again too. I think it's an important topic to talk about. Like you say, it's not as common as all the other sort of keto low carb stories that are out there. But I think keeping this information out there and keeping it in front of people so that they can see it as often as possible is really important. So maybe we'll sit down in a few more months and continue the conversation from there.
With any luck this summer, I get my 40th tournament win, and I have
Yeah.
something else to report on.
Yeah.
I'm stuck on 39 forever.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, good luck with that. I'm sure it'll come along. It's the life of a professional athlete would be, I was really athletic and I got some pretty high levels in judo when I was younger, but never really took it any farther than that. I wish I had now, but it's, so I can definitely understand that. So.
Well, shortly prior to our last conversation, I had gotten back from Santa Barbara at Nationals, and we took second at Nationals. So got into the final. I was this close to getting win number 40th, but no, had to settle for second place.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll wrap this up. If you want to just hang on for a second there, Paul, I'll say goodbye to everyone here, and then I'll come see you backstage. Thank you for bringing this information to everyone.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, well, that was Paul, Defense Whiz. Thanks, everyone, for being here tonight. I know we went a bit over time, but never enough time to talk about this important information. So I hope everyone tunes in next Thursday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. I'm not sure if we'll have a guest or not, or if we'll just hang out and chat, but we'll have another chaffle recipe on Saturday night, so look forward to that. Again, if you have any questions, leave a comment down in the comment section of the video, and I'll make sure that Paul sees the question, and we'll get that information back to you. So, as I always say, keep on thriving, my friends. Have a good night.